Hey, my name is Mason Reed. I'm 27 years old and I work as an electrical technician for a small company in the suburbs just outside Denver, Colorado. My job isn't glamorous. Fixing breaker panels, running new wiring, replacing outlets, troubleshooting power outages when someone's whole house goes dark. But I like it. There's something honest about it. You see the problem, you get your hands dirty, and you make it right again. I live in a modest one-story rental house on a quiet street lined with maple trees and low wooden fences. The place isn't much. Creaky hardwood floors, an old couch I bought secondhand, and a coffee maker that's older than I am. But it's mine. After years of bouncing around and trying to figure life out, this little house and my simple routine feel like enough. My neighbor, Brooke Sullivan, lives right next door. She's 30, works in healthcare, long shifts, late nights, the kind of schedule that never really lets you rest. We're friendly in that typical American neighbor way. We wave when we pull into our driveways, trade plates of food when one of us cooks too much, and help each other with small things. She once brought over homemade banana bread because she accidentally baked too many. I've fixed her porch light twice and unclogged her kitchen sink once. Nothing deep. Just the easy, comfortable rhythm of two people living side by side. I never thought of her as anything more than a good neighbor. She was older than me, beautiful in a quiet, effortless way, always busy, always carrying herself with that calm confidence. I figured she had her own life, probably plenty of people interested in her. I wasn't the type to read between the lines anyway. I like things straightforward. Until that Friday evening, I had a date. My first real one in months. Her name was Sienna Park, a graphic designer I'd met at a friend's backyard barbecue. She was funny, warm, and had smiled at me like she actually wanted to know more. We'd texted for a couple of weeks, and tonight we were finally meeting for dinner downtown. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror holding up 3 shirts, plain white, charcoal gray, and navy blue. Each one made me look either too serious or too casual. I stared at them, frustrated. Then I remembered Brooke. She had great taste. A few months ago, she'd helped me pick out a jacket for a work event, and I'd gotten more compliments that night than I had in years. Before I could overthink it, I grabbed all 3 shirts and walked across the small patch of grass that separated our houses. I knocked on her door. It took a moment before it opened. Brooke stood there looking exhausted. She was wearing an oversized gray hoodie, hair tied up in a messy bun, holding a steaming mug of tea. Her eyes looked tired, like she'd just come off a long shift. Still, she gave me that familiar small smile. "Mason, what's up?" I lifted the shirts like an idiot. "I need expert help. I've got a date tonight and I can't decide which one doesn't make me look like I'm trying too hard." Brooke blinked. For half a second, something flickered across her face. A tiny pause, like a light bulb flashing once and then going out. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Her house always felt warmer than mine. Soft lighting, books stacked neatly on the coffee table, the faint scent of lavender. I laid the 3 shirts across her couch. "Which one?" I asked. "Be honest. I want to look decent. Not like I'm trying to impress too much." Brooke walked over slowly. She touched the white shirt first, then the gray, then the navy. She was quiet longer than I expected. Finally, she picked up the white one and held it up. "This one." "Why?" I laughed a little. "Does it make me look more serious?" Brooke stared at the shirt for another second, then looked straight at me. Her voice came out soft, almost too soft. "Because it makes you look real." I grinned. "Real is good, right? I want her to see I'm serious." Brooke didn't smile back this time. She looked down at the shirt in her hands, fingers tightening on the fabric. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier. I was about to make another joke to break the silence when she lifted her head again. Her eyes were glistening. "You're blind, Mason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze. Brooke took a shaky breath, then said it again, clearer this time, like she couldn't hold it in anymore. "I'm in love with you." The words hit me like cold water. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stood there holding the other 2 shirts, heart hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it. Brooke's face changed instantly. Regret, panic, embarrassment all flashing across it at once. She turned away quickly, walking toward the front door. "Forget I said that," she said, her voice cracking. "I shouldn't have. Just go, Mason, please." She opened the door. The cool evening air rushed in. I wanted to say something, anything, but my brain had gone completely blank. I walked past her, still clutching the shirts, and stepped out onto her porch. The door closed softly behind me. I crossed the grass back to my own house in a daze. My hands were shaking. I went inside, shut the door, and just stood there in the middle of my living room, staring at nothing. Brooke's voice kept echoing in my head. "You're blind, Mason. I'm in love with you." Everything I thought I knew about my quiet, simple life had just cracked wide open, and I had no idea what to do next. I stood in my bedroom for what felt like forever, staring at the white shirt still in my hands. My mind was spinning. Brooke's words kept repeating on a loop. "You're blind, Mason. I'm in love with you." I should have been thinking about Sienna, about the date I'd been looking forward to for days. Instead, all I could hear was Brooke's voice cracking when she told me to leave. I changed into the white shirt anyway, not because she'd chosen it, but because my brain was too numb to pick anything else. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and drove downtown like I was on autopilot. The city lights blurred past the windows. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence made everything louder. Sienna was already waiting at the restaurant when I arrived. It was a cozy Italian place with warm lighting and exposed brick walls. She looked beautiful. Black dress, hair down, smiling the moment she saw me. "You look nice," she said, standing up to hug me. "The white shirt suits you." "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. "You look great too." We sat down and ordered. Sienna talked easily about her latest design project, a funny client who kept changing his mind, how her roommate's cat had destroyed her favorite plant. She laughed at her own stories, and I tried to laugh with her. I really did. But I wasn't there. Every time she leaned forward or asked me a question, my mind drifted back to Brooke, to the way her eyes had looked when she said those words, to the way she'd turned away like she regretted everything the second they left her mouth. "Earth to Mason," Sienna said, waving her hand in front of my face with a playful smile. "You okay? You seem somewhere else tonight." I blinked and sat up straighter. "Sorry, long day at work. One of the jobs ran late." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully buy it. Still, she kept the conversation going. She asked about my week, about the old car I was fixing up on weekends. I answered as best I could, but my replies felt flat, mechanical. Halfway through dinner, Sienna set her fork down and looked at me seriously. "Mason, if you're not feeling this tonight, it's okay to say so. I won't be mad." I hated myself in that moment. Sienna was kind, funny, and clearly interested. She didn't deserve to sit across from someone who couldn't stop thinking about the woman next door. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "You're right. My head's not fully here tonight. It's not you. Work's been heavy and other stuff." She gave me a small, understanding smile. "It's fine, really. Maybe we can try again another time when you're less distracted?" "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't sure there would be another time. "I'd like that." The rest of the dinner felt shorter. We finished eating, split the bill, and walked out to the parking lot. Sienna gave me a quick hug. "Drive safe," she said. "You too." I got in my car and sat there for a minute with the engine off. My hands were gripping the steering wheel too tightly. I kept hearing Brooke's voice again. "You're blind, Mason. I'm in love with you." The drive home felt longer than usual. When I turned onto our quiet street, the houses were mostly dark. I slowed down as I passed Brooke's place. Her lights were off, no porch light, no sign of life. Just a dark, silent house. I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, staring at her front door across the small lawn. I thought about walking over. I thought about knocking. I even imagined what I would say if she opened the door. But I didn't move. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, I went on my date, but all I could think about was you?" That sounded selfish, cruel even. She had already put herself out there, and I had walked away without a word. So, I stayed in the car until the cold started to creep in. Then I went inside, dropped the white shirt on the floor, and lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. The next 3 days were quiet in the worst way. Brooke's car was in her driveway, but I never saw her. No lights turned on at normal hours. No sound of her moving around the house. No texts. No waves across the yard. Nothing. I sent her one message on Sunday night. "Brooke, you okay?" No reply. By Tuesday, the silence was eating at me. I couldn't focus at work. I kept wondering if she was hurting, if she regretted saying anything, if she was avoiding me because I hadn't said anything back. That evening after my shift, I stopped at the coffee shop we both liked. I ordered her usual, oat milk latte, extra shot, no foam. I drove home, parked in my driveway, and walked across the grass to her front door. I set the coffee on her welcome mat. No note, just the cup. The next morning when I left for work, the cup was gone. She had taken it, but still, no message. No knock on my door, no sign that anything had changed. I stood on my porch for a long minute, staring at her dark windows, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. Brooke was still there. She just didn't know how to face me yet. And I didn't know how to tell her that I couldn't stop thinking about her either. I lasted 4 more days. 4 days of silence that felt heavier than any words could. 4 days of driving past her house and seeing her car in the driveway but never seeing her. 4 days of checking my phone for a message that never came. 4 days of telling myself I should give her space, while every night I lay awake replaying the moment she said, "I'm in love with you." By Saturday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I didn't rehearse. I just knew if I waited any longer, the silence would become permanent, and I would lose something I hadn't even realized I had. I walked across the grass between our houses for the second time that week. This time, my steps were heavier. My heart was louder. When I reached her door, I didn't hesitate. I knocked. It took longer than usual for her to answer. When the door finally opened, Brooke stood there looking exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she hadn't slept much. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and sweatpants, hair tied back loosely. She looked at me for a long second, surprised, then tired. "Mason." Her voice was soft, not angry, just worn down. I didn't wait for her to speak first. "I'm not here to make things weird," I said, "but I can't keep pretending nothing happened. Can I come in, just for a minute?" She hesitated, then stepped aside without a word. Inside, her house felt different. The usual warmth was missing. There were papers scattered on the coffee table, a half-empty mug of tea, and the lights were dimmer than normal. She closed the door behind me and stood with her arms wrapped around herself. We sat on the couch, the same couch where I had shown her the shirts just days ago. The silence between us was thick. Brooke spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have said it. I know that. I saw your face, and I knew I'd ruined everything. I'm sorry." "You didn't ruin anything," I said quickly. "You just caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. I still don't know what to say, but I know I don't want to act like it didn't happen." She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together. "I've felt this way for a while," she admitted. "Longer than I should have. I told myself it was stupid. You're younger, you're my neighbor, you're you. But every time you came over, every time you fixed something or brought my mail or just smiled at me across the yard, it got harder to ignore." She took a shaky breath. I didn't plan to say it that night. It just came out. And then I saw how shocked you were, and I panicked. I thought if I pushed you away fast enough, maybe we could pretend it never happened. "I don't want to pretend," I said. Brooke looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "Then what do you want, Mason?" I swallowed hard. The truth felt heavy, but I owed it to her. "I don't know exactly what I feel yet. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm in love with you right now because that wouldn't be fair. But I know this. The last few days without seeing you or hearing from you, they felt wrong. Empty. I kept thinking about you. About how you always remember the small things. About how safe it feels just being around you. And I realized I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Brooke's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "I'm older than you," she said quietly. "I have a complicated life, long hours, emotional baggage. I can't offer you something simple or easy." "I'm not asking for simple or easy," I replied. "I'm asking for real. And if you'll let me, I want to try. Slowly, no pressure, no expectations. Just us figuring it out. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded, very small. Okay, she whispered. Slow. No pressure. We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. We just sat there on the couch, the weight between us finally lifting a little. When I stood up to leave, Brooke walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, she looked at me and said softly, Thank you for knocking again. I turned back and gave her a small smile. I'll keep knocking as long as you don't tell me to stop. Brooke's lips curved into the faintest smile I'd seen in days. I won't. I walked back across the grass to my own house, feeling lighter than I had in almost a week. The night air felt cooler. The stars seemed a little brighter. For the first time since she said those words, I wasn't scared. I was hopeful. And that felt like the beginning of something neither of us could pretend wasn't real anymore. The days after that conversation felt different, but not in a sudden, dramatic way. There were no grand declarations, no rushed kisses, no promises we weren't ready to keep. Instead, we began again slowly, carefully, the way two people do when they know how easily something fragile can break. It started with a simple text from Brooke the next evening. If you're not busy, pizza tonight? I stared at the message for a long minute before replying. No olives. I'll bring drinks. When I knocked on her door an hour later, she opened it wearing an old college hoodie and jeans, hair tied back loosely. She looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in days. The tension from our last talk had softened into something quieter, warmer. We ate on the couch, the pizza box open between us, a random movie playing on the TV that neither of us was really watching. We talked about small things at first, how her shift had gone, the weird customer I'd dealt with that day, the neighbor down the street who kept leaving his trash cans out too long. But slowly, the conversation drifted deeper. At one point, Brooke set her slice down and looked at me. I meant what I said about going slow, she told me. I'm not ready for anything big or complicated. I don't want to pretend this isn't happening either. I don't want to pretend anymore, I said. Slow is good. I'm not in a rush. She smiled, small but real, and for the first time since she'd said those 3 words, the air between us felt lighter. That became our new rhythm. Some nights she would text me after a long shift, pizza, or I made too much pasta again. Other nights I would knock on her door with a 6-pack and ask if she wanted company. We watched old movies, shared food, talked until the sky outside turned dark. Sometimes we sat in comfortable silence, her shoulder brushing mine on the couch, my arm resting along the back of the cushions. The touches started small. One evening, while we were watching a movie, her hand accidentally brushed against mine when she reached for the remote. She didn't pull away, neither did I. Another night, when she laughed at something I said, she leaned her head against my shoulder for just a few seconds before sitting up again. Each time, the contact lingered a little longer than it used to. Each time, it felt less accidental. Brooke still reminded me to go slow. She would say it quietly, almost to herself, when the moment grew too warm. Slow, she'd whisper with a small smile. And I respected that. I never pushed. I never asked for more than she was ready to give. But the connection between us kept growing in the quiet spaces. I started leaving the porch light on when I knew she had a late shift. She would come home exhausted, see the light, and sometimes send a single text. Thank you. In return, she began bringing over small things. A slice of the banana bread she baked on weekends, a container of soup when she knew I'd worked late, a note on my door that simply said, "Don't forget to eat." We talked more deeply, too. She told me about the long hours at the hospital, how some days the weight of other people's pain felt too heavy to carry. I told her about the loneliness I used to call peace, and how I was starting to realize it had been fear wearing a different mask. We didn't try to fix each other. We just listened. One Friday night, after a particularly rough week for both of us, she texted me, "Come over, I don't want to be alone tonight." When I arrived, she was already curled up on the couch in her hoodie, a blanket over her legs. We didn't watch anything. We just sat together. At some point, her head found its way to my shoulder again. This time, she didn't move it. I rested my hand lightly on her arm, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. We fell asleep like that, fully clothed, nothing more than her head on my shoulder and my arm around her. When I woke up hours later, the TV was still flickering with the menu screen, and Brooke was still there, warm and trusting against me. That was the first night I stayed until morning. Nothing physical happened. We didn't cross any lines, but something between us had quietly deepened. A few days later, I ran into Sienna at the grocery store. She smiled politely when she saw me. "Hey, Mason, how have you been?" I told her the truth, gently but clearly, that I was seeing someone, that I was sorry for how our last date had gone. She took it well, wished me luck, and we parted on good terms. When I told Brooke about it that evening, she didn't say much at first. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for being honest with her," she said softly. "And with me." Our relationship continued to grow in those small, steady ways. We never labeled it. We didn't need to. It was ours, quiet, careful, and real. And every time Brooke smiled at me across the yard or left a warm meal on my porch or let her hand rest on mine while we watched a movie, I felt the same thing. We weren't rushing. We were building. And for the first time in a long time, that felt exactly right. The weeks that followed settled into something quiet and steady, like the first warm days after a long winter. Brooke and I didn't rush. We didn't put a label on what we were. We simply chose each other in small, everyday ways. Some evenings she would text me after a long shift. "Pizza?" Or, "I baked too much again." I would walk across the grass with a six-pack or a bag of takeout, and we would eat on her couch while an old movie played in the background. Her head would eventually find its way to my shoulder. My arm would rest around her. Neither of us said much, but the silence felt full. One Thursday night, Brooke came home later than usual. I saw her car pull in just after midnight, the headlights cutting across the dark street. I had left the porch light on like I always did when she worked late. She didn't wave. She just walked inside slowly, shoulders heavy. I waited 10 minutes, then crossed the yard and knocked softly on her back door. She opened it still wearing her scrubs, hair falling out of its bun, eyes tired and red-rimmed. She looked at me for a long second, then stepped aside without a word. I didn't ask if she was okay. I already knew she wasn't. We sat on the couch in the dim light of a single lamp. She curled into herself, knees pulled up, blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. I sat close, but not too close, giving her space to breathe. After a while she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Today was bad," she said. "A patient, a little boy. We did everything we could. He didn't make it." Her shoulders started to shake. I moved closer and gently pulled her into my arms. She didn't resist. She buried her face against my chest and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep, exhausted sobs that had been building for hours, maybe days. I held her and let her cry. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't tell her it would be okay. I just stayed there, one hand slowly rubbing her back, the other resting in her hair. When the tears finally slowed, she spoke again, voice muffled against my shirt. "I'm scared, Mason." "Of what?" She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were swollen, raw. "I'm scared that I don't deserve this. That I don't deserve you. I've been carrying so much for so long. What if I'm too broken? What if I drag you down with me?" I brushed a tear from her cheek with my thumb. "You're not broken," I said quietly. "You're tired. There's a difference." She let out a shaky breath. "I don't want to be someone's burden." "You're not," I told her, my voice steady. "You're the person I want to come home to. You're the person who makes this house feel less empty. You're the person I choose, Brooke, every single day." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face like she was afraid the words might disappear. "You choose me?" she whispered. "I choose you," I said clearly. "Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I want to fix you. I choose you because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Brooke's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time they were different. Softer. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine. "I choose you too," she whispered. "Even if I'm scared, even if it's slow, I choose you." We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. We just held each other on that couch until the sky outside began to lighten. When she finally fell asleep against me, I stayed awake a little longer, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady beat of her heart against my chest. That was the night everything became real. From then on, we stopped hiding. Not from each other and not from the world. We still moved slowly. Brooke needed time, and I gave it to her without question. But the walls between our two houses started to feel less like boundaries and more like doorways. Some mornings I would wake up to find her already in my kitchen, making coffee in one of my old mugs. Other evenings I would come home to find her asleep on my couch with a book still open on her chest. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, sat on the porch steps, talking until the stars came out. The neighbors noticed eventually. Mrs. Hargrove from across the street gave us a knowing smile one afternoon when she saw Brooke leaving my house. We didn't explain. We didn't need to. One quiet Sunday morning, Brooke and I sat on her porch with fresh coffee, watching the sunlight filter through the maple trees. She reached over and took my hand, threading her fingers through mine. "I don't need big promises," she said softly. "I just need to know you're choosing me every day." "I am," I told her. "And I will." She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and stayed there. We didn't need fireworks. We didn't need perfect timing. We just needed each other. And for the first time in both our lives, that felt like more than enough. Two houses stood side by side on a quiet street in Denver. Two porch lights stayed on late into the night. And between them, two people who had once been strangers learned how to choose each other. Not with grand gestures, but with small, steady steps. One clear, honest choice at a time.